The coffee shop was nearly empty when Frank walked in. His back was stiff. His movements were slow. He wore a plain gray shirt and jeans that had seen better days. The young barista looked up from her phone. She smiled. It was the kind of smile people give when they're being polite but not really paying attention. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Black coffee, large," Frank said. His voice was quiet but steady. She nodded and turned to the machine. Frank moved toward a corner table. He always sat in corners. Old habits never die. Behind him, 3 younger men walked in. They were loud. Their laughter filled the small space. They wore expensive workout clothes and carried gym bags. "Bro, did you see that old guy?" one of them said. He wasn't trying to whisper. Frank heard it. He always heard everything. But he didn't turn around. The barista brought his coffee. Frank thanked her. He wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth felt good against his palms. "Excuse me, sir." One of the young men was standing beside his table now. He had a wide grin on his face. "My friends and I were just wondering about your tattoo." Frank's left forearm rested on the table. The tattoo was visible. It was faded now. The ink had been bright once, bold. Now it looked like something from another lifetime. "What about it?" Frank asked. He didn't look up. "Well," the young man glanced back at his friends. They were watching, grinning. "It just looks, I don't know, kind of random. Is that supposed to be something?" The tattoo showed an eagle, a globe, an anchor. Beneath it were numbers, and a symbol that most people wouldn't recognize. "It's nothing," Frank said. "Just something from a long time ago." "Must have hurt though, right?" Another one called from across the room. "All that ink for something nobody even knows what it is." They laughed. Not cruel laughter, just the thoughtless kind. The kind that comes from people who have never needed to prove anything to anyone. Frank took a sip of his coffee. He said nothing. The door opened again. This time a man in his 40s walked in. He wore a crisp uniform, Marine Corps dress blues. The medals on his chest caught the light. Captain's bars gleamed on his collar. The coffee shop went quieter. Even the loud young men noticed. There was something about a dress uniform that commanded respect, even from people who didn't understand what it meant. The captain ordered his coffee. As he waited, his eyes scanned the room. They passed over the young men, over the barista. Then they stopped. They stopped on Frank's arm. The captain's expression changed. It was subtle, but Frank saw it. He'd been trained to see everything. The captain's coffee arrived, but he didn't leave. Instead, he walked directly toward Frank's table. "Sir," the captain said. His voice was different from the young men. It carried weight. "May I?" He gestured to the empty chair. Frank looked up. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, something the others in the room couldn't see. "Free country," Frank said. The captain sat down. He set his coffee on the table carefully. His gaze went back to the tattoo. "1st Battalion, 5th Marines," the captain said quietly. "Vietnam." Frank's jaw tightened just slightly. "Long time ago." "Not long enough to forget," the captain replied. The young men were watching now. Their phones were out, but they weren't laughing anymore. They sensed something had shifted. They just didn't know what. "You were there for Hue City," the captain continued. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact. Frank's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "Among other places." "The symbol under the numbers," the captain said. "That's not standard. That's something the survivors added, after." Frank finally looked directly at the captain, really looked at him. "You know your history." "I know my Corps," the captain said, "and I know what that symbol means. Only the men who fought through the Citadel wore it. Only the ones who made it out." The barista had stopped pretending to work. She was listening. The young men were quiet now, completely quiet. "January through February," the captain said. 1968, 26 days of urban combat, house to house, room to room. The bloodiest urban battle in Marine Corps history since the Korean War. Frank's hands were steady, but his eyes had changed. They'd gone somewhere else, somewhere dark, somewhere far away. 540 Marines, the captain continued. By the end of it, 147 were dead, another 857 wounded. Some units had 80% casualties. He paused, his voice dropped lower. And you were there for all of it. Frank didn't confirm it, he didn't deny it. He just sat there, an old man in a coffee shop, with a faded tattoo that nobody understood. The young men who were laughing, the captain said. He didn't look at them. They don't know, they can't know. They've never stood in a place where every door might be the last door they ever open, where every window might hide the bullet with their name on it. One of the young men shifted uncomfortably. His face had gone red. I wasn't trying to, he started. The captain held up one hand, not aggressive, just firm. I'm not here to shame anyone, he said, but that tattoo you mocked, that's not just ink. That's blood. That's brothers who didn't come home. That's 26 days of hell that most people can't even imagine. Frank took another sip of his coffee. His hands still didn't shake. They never shook. Not anymore, not after everything. Sir, the captain said to Frank, I'm Captain Morrison, 4th Marines, 3 tour in Fallujah. Frank, the old man replied, just Frank. Nothing just about it, Morrison said. May I ask you something? Frank shrugged, go ahead. Do you ever talk about it, what you saw, what you did? Frank was quiet for a long moment. Outside, cars passed. The world kept moving. It always did, whether you were ready or not. Who would I tell? Frank finally said. Who would understand? Morrison nodded slowly. That's the weight, isn't it? Not just what happened, but carrying it alone. The young man who'd first approached Frank's table stepped forward. He looked different now, smaller somehow, younger. Sir, he said, his voice was quiet. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Frank looked at him, really looked at him, saw a kid who'd probably never faced real hardship, never had to. You weren't supposed to know, Frank said. That's the point. We did it so you wouldn't have to. The words hung in the air, simple, true, heavy. Morrison pulled out his phone. He opened something, turned the screen toward Frank. This was my platoon, he said. Fallujah 2004, second battle. Frank looked at the photo, young faces, dirty uniforms, eyes that had seen too much too soon. 3 of them didn't make it home, Morrison said. I think about them every day. You always will, Frank said. That never stops. No, Morrison agreed, it doesn't. The barista approached slowly. She set 2 fresh coffees on the table. These are on the house, she said softly. Frank looked up at her. You don't have to do that. I know, she said, but I want to. My grandfather was a Marine, Korea. He never talked about it either, but I saw his medals once when I was little. He cried when he showed them to me, just once, then never again. Morrison and Frank sat in silence for a moment. 2 warriors, different wars, same weight. What was the worst part? One of the young men asked. He'd moved closer. His voice was different now, respectful, genuine. Frank considered the question. Most people asked the wrong things. They wanted action stories, heroics. They wanted something they could picture like a movie. The quiet after, Frank said finally. When the shooting stopped, when you realized you were still breathing, and you started counting who wasn't. Morrison nodded. He understood. He'd done that same counting. We lost our lieutenant on day 3, Frank continued. His voice was steady but distant. Kid from Ohio, 23 years old. He'd been writing a letter to his mother, never finished it. I still remember the first line. Dear Mom, don't worry about me, I'm with good men. The coffee shop was completely silent now. We carried him for 2 miles, Frank said, through streets where every corner could kill you. Nobody said a word about leaving him. That wasn't even a question. You brought your brothers home, all of them, no matter what. One of the young men wiped his eyes quickly. He thought no one saw, but Frank saw everything, always had. After Hugh, Frank continued, we got pulled back. I remember sitting in a tent. Clean clothes felt wrong. Hot food felt wrong. Being alive felt wrong. Survivor's guilt, Morrison said quietly. That's what the doctors call it now, Frank agreed. Back then we just called it Tuesday. You stuffed it down. You moved forward, because what else could you do? Did you have family when you got back? The barista asked. She was leaning against a nearby table now, listening. Had a girl waiting, Frank said. Sweet thing. Wrote me letters every week I was gone. When I got home, she took one look at me and knew I wasn't the same person she'd sent off. Did she leave? Morrison asked. No, Frank said. A small smile touched his lips just for a second. She married me anyway, said she didn't fall in love with the boy who left. She fell in love with the man who came back, even if he was broken. Was, Morrison asked. She passed 6 years ago, Frank said. Cancer. I held her hand at the end, told her she was the bravest person I ever knew, and I meant it. What she did, staying with me through all those years, all those nightmares, all those times I couldn't talk about what I'd seen, that took more courage than anything I did in Vietnam. The young men were all sitting now, at nearby tables. They weren't on their phones, they were just listening. What's your name? Frank asked one of them, the first one who'd spoken. Derek, the young man said. Derek, Frank repeated. You go to college? Yes, sir, State University, business major. Frank nodded. Good, that's good, your parents proud. I think so, Derek said. Yeah. They should be, Frank said. You know why? Derek shook his head. Because you get to go to college, Frank said. You get to worry about exams and girlfriends and what job you'll get when you graduate. You don't have to worry about which firefight you'll be in next week. That's not a small thing. That's everything. I never thought about it like that, Derek admitted. Most people don't, Frank said. That's okay. That's actually good. It means we did our job. The whole point was so the next generation wouldn't have to do what we did. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Do you ever regret it, going? Frank thought about that, really thought about it. I regret what it cost, he said. I regret the friends I lost. I regret the years I spent trying to forget instead of trying to heal. But do I regret serving? No, someone had to, and it was my turn. That's what they don't teach in schools, Morrison said. The simple fact that someone has to stand up, someone has to go, and most of the time it's quiet people who'd rather be home, not the loud ones looking for glory. Frank touched his tattoo. His fingers traced the faded eagle. This symbol, he said, the one under the numbers, we added it ourselves, after Hue, after we buried our dead and patched up our wounded, after we realized we'd survived something that should have killed all of us. What does it mean? The barista asked. It's a door, Frank said. Half open, half closed. It represents every doorway we went through in that city. Every moment we stepped from one room to the next, not knowing if we'd take another step after that. He paused. His eyes were somewhere else again. We made a promise, he continued. Those of us who got the tattoo, we promised that every door we walked through for the rest of our lives, we'd remember the ones who didn't get to walk through any more doors. We'd live for them. We'd make it mean something. Did you, Derek asked quietly, make it mean something? Frank looked at him. I tried, worked construction for 40 years, built schools, hospitals, houses, places where people could live safe lives, raised 3 kids, they all went to college, one's a teacher now, one's a nurse, one's a lawyer who does pro bono work for veterans. That's beautiful, the barista said. Her eyes were wet. It's just a life, Frank said, but it's the life they gave me, so I tried to honor it. Morrison pulled out a card from his wallet. He wrote something on the back, slid it across the table to Frank. That's my personal number, he said. I run a veterans group every Thursday night. We meet at the VFW Hall on Madison Street, just guys talking, coffee, sometimes beer, no pressure, No therapy speak, just understanding. Frank picked up the card, looked at it, said nothing. You don't have to come, Morrison continued. But the offer stands, forever, because that tattoo means you're still one of us. Time doesn't change that, nothing changes that. Frank slipped the card into his pocket. Maybe, he said. That's all I ask, Morrison said. Derek stood up. He walked to Frank's table, extended his hand. Thank you, he said, for your service, and I'm sorry for being an idiot earlier. Frank shook his hand. His grip was still strong. Decades of work had kept him solid. You weren't an idiot, you were just young, that's allowed. The other young men came over too, one by one. They shook Frank's hand, some mumbled thanks, some said nothing, but their eyes said everything. When they left, they were quieter, different. Maybe they'd forget by tomorrow, maybe they wouldn't, but for this moment. They understood something they hadn't understood before. Morrison finished his coffee. I should get going. Ceremony at the base in an hour. What kind? Frank asked. Memorial dedication. Young corporal. IED in Afghanistan 2 years ago. We're finally unveiling his plaque. Frank nodded. Tell his family something for me. What's that? Tell them he mattered. Tell them we remember. Tell them the door he walked through last. Tell them it stays open. In here. Frank tapped his chest. In all of us who serve. Morrison's jaw tight. He stood, came to attention, saluted. Frank hesitated, then slowly stood. His back straightened. Decades fell away. For just a moment he wasn't an old man in a coffee shop. He was a Marine again, young, strong, unbroken. He returned the salute. Morrison held it for 3 seconds, then dropped his hand. Semper Fi, brother. Semper Fi, Frank replied. When Morrison left, Frank sat back down. His coffee was cold now. He didn't care. He just sat there, an old man with a faded tattoo, in a quiet coffee shop, on an ordinary Tuesday. The barista approached again. Can I get you anything else? No thank you, Frank said. I'm good. She nodded, started to walk away, then stopped. My grandfather, she said, before he passed, he told me something. He said the hardest part of war wasn't the fighting. It was coming home and pretending you hadn't changed. Frank looked at her, really looked at her. Your grandfather was a smart man. He was, she agreed. I miss him. He's still with you, Frank said. In here, he tapped his chest again. That's what the tattoo means, that's what all of it means. The ones we lost, they're not gone, not really. We carry them, every day, every door, every choice. She smiled. It was a sad smile, but real. Thank you for that. Frank finished his cold coffee, left a $20 bill on the table for a $6 coffee, walked toward the door. Outside, the sun was bright. The world was loud, cars and people and life moving forward like it always did. He touched his tattoo one more time, felt the raised skin, the faded ink, the memories burned into his flesh. Then he walked through the door, half open, half closed, just like always, just like every door since 1968. Behind him, the coffee shop returned to normal, but something had changed. The young men would go home and maybe look up the Battle of Hue City. Maybe they'd understand a little more, maybe not. The barista would call her grandmother tonight, ask about her grandfather's service, actually listen this time. And Frank would go home to his empty house, look at the photo of his wife on the mantel, tell her about his day, about the captain, about the kids who laughed and then didn't. He'd pull out the card from his pocket, look at it, maybe this Thursday, maybe next month, maybe never. But he'd keep it, because Morrison was right. Time didn't change what that tattoo meant. Nothing changed what it meant. 57 years later, Frank was still walking through doors, still carrying his brothers, still honoring the promise made in blood and ink in a city half a world away. Still serving, in his own quiet way, on his own quiet terms. Just an old man with a faded tattoo. And a story nobody asked to hear. Until today. The end. The most powerful stories are the ones we don't see. The quiet strength, the hidden valor, the men and women who served and came home and simply lived. They don't ask for recognition, they don't seek attention, but their sacrifice echoes through every freedom we take for granted, every peaceful morning, every safe night. Remember them, honor them, and maybe, just maybe, take a second look at the old man sitting alone, because his tattoo might tell a story worth hearing.